The roots of apartheid: power, profits, and class struggle. The origin of apartheid in South Africa. Apartheid, the brutal system of racial segregation in South Africa, was not just about race. It was about power, profits, and class struggle. Today, we'll explore how apartheid emerged, revealing the economic forces and ruling class interests that shaped it. To understand apartheid, we need to go back to colonial South Africa. In the 17th century, the Dutch and later the British seized control of the land, establishing a settler colony. But what drove this colonization? Resources, land, diamonds, and, most importantly, gold. South Africa's economy was built on the backs of African laborers, exploited for the benefit of a white ruling class. Marxism tells us that history is shaped by economic forces and class conflict. The wealthy elite always seeks to maximize profits by controlling labor. In South Africa, this meant keeping black workers cheap, unorganized, and dependent on white employers. Apartheid was not just racism, it was a tool of economic control. By the late 19th century, South Africa had become a global economic hub, thanks to its massive gold and diamond reserves. But mining was dangerous, exhausting, and required a large, cheap workforce. The capitalist class, British and Afrikaner mine owners, faced a problem: how to ensure steady labor while keeping costs low. The solution: racial segregation. The 1913 Land Act laid the foundation for apartheid by forcing black South Africans onto reserves, restricting their land ownership, and making them dependent on white-owned industries for work. This meant an endless supply of cheap labor for mines and farms, while white landowners and capitalists thrived. Fast forward to 1948, when the National Party took power. Apartheid laws formalized what had already been happening for decades: passed laws, segregated housing, and the brutal suppression of black resistance. Why? Because the Afrikaner ruling class, now dominant, needed to protect its economic interests against growing labor unrest and anti-colonial movements. But the working class, both black and white, did not accept their fate quietly. Strikes, protests, and armed resistance grew. Marxists argue that apartheid wasn't just ended by moral pressure, it collapsed under economic contradictions. International sanctions, worker resistance, and the cost of military repression made apartheid unsustainable for the capitalist elite. The fight against apartheid was not just a moral struggle, it was a class struggle. Organizations like the African National Congress, ANC, the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, and trade unions fought for political and economic liberation. While leaders like Nelson Mandela are widely celebrated, the real engine of resistance came from workers, students, and rural communities who organized strikes, armed resistance, and international solidarity movements. When apartheid formally ended in 1994, political power shifted, but economic power remained in the hands of the same elites. The ANC government, rather than pursuing radical redistribution, embraced neoliberal policies that protected corporate interests. Land reform stalled, wealth remained concentrated, and economic apartheid continued under a new form. South Africa's economy still largely serves multinational corporations and the wealthy, while the working class, especially black South Africans, face poverty and unemployment. Today, apartheid has been replaced by economic apartheid. The country remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. Wages remain low, land is still concentrated in the hands of a few, and black workers continue to bear the brunt of economic exploitation. Neoliberal policies, including privatization and austerity, have reinforced economic apartheid rather than dismantling it. The result: the working class, especially the black working class, remains trapped in a cycle of poverty and dispossession. For South Africa to truly break from apartheid's legacy, political freedom must be matched with economic freedom. Socialist and labor movements argue that nationalizing key industries, redistributing land, and implementing worker-led economic structures are the only way to achieve real liberation. Without structural change, apartheid's ghost will continue to haunt South Africa. The question remains, will the people rise to complete the revolution, or will capitalism maintain its grip on the country's future? So, what can we learn from apartheid's history? Racial oppression and economic exploitation go hand in hand. Today, South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, proving that the struggle for true economic justice is far from over. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Untold Africa.